Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of my Out of the Park baseball series in OOTP 22 with the Pittsburgh Pirates. And as I usually kind of do start out seasons, we're here at the beginning of June 3rd, and I'm kind of going to go through team updates and just talk about how the team has been performing so far this season. So, as you can see, to this point, our record is 25-25, so an exactly 500 record, which is pretty good. Of course, last season we had a pretty big improvement from our previous season's record. We won 67 games in 2021, 76 in the next year, and then this year we are off to a 500 start. Our expected record is 21-29, so we're performing a bit above our weight, or what would be suggested that our record would be based on kind of how our team has been performing. Kind of with the team stats rankings, we pretty much have been kind of how I would expect. Our offense isn't really that good. We're 14th in the National League in runs scored. Our batting WAR is pretty low. We have the lowest WOBA in the National League. We don't hit lots of home runs. Something we do well is run the bases. We steal a lot of bases. We are one of the best teams in the National League at base running. That helps us score some runs, so mitigates how poor our offense is. As you can see again, like basically like all of the like impact, like hitting metrics like OPS, batting WAR, WOBA, home runs. Like we're at the bottom. We just don't hit well, and we don't hit well for power. So we're pretty low there. Pitching wise, we're actually doing pretty good. We're 5th in runs against. Our starters ERA is pretty good. Our bullpen ERA is not. It's actually the worst in National League. FIP wise as a team, we're about 6th, which I feel like is probably a fair place to put our total pitching. We did acquire a bunch of guys who strike out more guys this year, so that will make our FIP higher. Our pitching WAR is also pretty high. Again, we don't strike out a ton of guys, but that was one thing that we tried to do in the offseason. We brought in some pitchers who are better at striking out guys, and we definitely have a lot of new faces in the pitching side of things this year. Defensively, we're pretty good. We've been pretty good this entire time so far. Of course, this is our 3rd season, and a lot of the players we have / have acquired are just pretty good defenders. So our defense has been pretty good. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at how the team is performing. First, we're going to go ahead and look at hitters, and then of course we'll go ahead and look at pitching later. So our catching tandem, pretty much as I've talked about this entire series, has been pretty great. Rortvedt, our Rule 5 guy that picked up, he could honestly be playing better at the plate. Hasn't been awesome. 252, 300, and 388. Again, not hitting for much power, although we don't really have many players hitting for much power. So he hasn't been great offensively, but he's still been pretty good, especially for a catcher. And I'm confident that he can continue to hit better throughout the season, which he has done this year. He started off rougher than this, and he has raised his numbers even a good bit in the last week. Stallings has been really good. He, of course, was really good last year, and he, again, was pretty good in 2021. He's kind of one of the players I noticed in OOTP just always, like, plays well. Like, he's not rated, like, particularly high. Like, he's of course like a pretty good defensive catcher, but like his offensive ratings really aren't anything special. Like, he's got decent power to the gaps, but other than that, I mean you can see none of his offensive ratings are really even like above 50. Avoid K's is his 2nd highest rating, and he still is just continually a pretty good offensive player for us. So kind of interesting to see that, but again, not going to complain. This honestly, I think he has one more year of team control left, and honestly, he probably won't be on the team next year if he continues playing this well. He's a guy who we could look to trade because it's just not worth it to be like a small market team that we are and pay him that much for a catching tandem when we don't have a DH that one of these guys could take up ABs in. So yep, catching duo pretty good, pretty expected. Luke and Baker, of course, our Rule 5 pick from this year, he has been actually pretty awful. He's gotten a good chunk of ABs. 83 is not too much, but he just hasn't been very good. He just hasn't been hitting the ball very hard. Not slinging a lot, striking out an absolute ton. So going to be hard to make an impact when you're striking out almost 40% of the time. Cheju Ko, though, the guy who we brought in last year to be, an international free agent we got, he has been awesome this year. He almost has pretty much recreated his value from last year already, and he's only started 36 games, appeared in 48. He's slashing 294, 365, and 556. He's been well above league average wise in the hitting department. He's been awesome. This is pretty much the player that we expected to get, of course. His hitting ratings are awesome. This is the player that we expected that we would get, and it's awesome to see that he is performing very well. Second base wise, Admin, he's been pretty bad. His OPS plus is 66. He's just been a better replacement player, level player. We don't really have anybody else to play at second base, so he's going to be there for the foreseeable future. Brian Hayes has been, of course, playing at third base. He hasn't been off to the greatest start. Again, he's not particularly hitting for much power, only slugging 381. Other than that, his average is fine. His OBP is pretty in line with what it's been the past few years. Hopefully, we can see another improvement from him. He's improved each of the last 2 years, so hopefully this third season would be no different. So hopefully he can help us out there. Daryl Estrada is actually a new player that we just acquired off of waivers. Almeas actually got hurt, so he's down for about 2 weeks. We don't really have any other options, so I just happened to look on waivers, and Estrada was basically the best option available on waivers. I don't particularly, think he's a great player. He doesn't really have a good discipline rating, which is something that I like to have. He's not a particularly good defender either. He's just kind of a middle-of-the-road player, but again, there weren't really any immediate options that we could have and we needed to get another infielder on our roster, on the Major League roster, that is. So I went ahead and picked him up. As for Almeas, he actually hasn't been too great either. Of course, he's not a very good hitter. Last year when we brought him up, he hit pretty well, actually. He almost had an OPS plus of league average 100, and of course he plays good defense, so that's just a fantastic season for him. But again, he's not doing that this year. We don't really have any better options at this point. That's a position of need that we have going in the future. Up the middle, we are pretty weak at shortstop and second base, and you can just add center field in that too. Other than catcher up the middle, we are usually pretty bad. Cole Tucker, I suppose I should probably mention him now. He is pretty much a utility player. He's played a lot of right, a good amount of shortstop, a little bit of third and center this year. He has not been nearly as good with the bat as he was last year and even the previous year where he got a little bit of time. He also hasn't gotten too many ABs. 90 again. Not the most. He's not getting everyday time, but he's playing pretty frequently, and he's just been very bad with the bat this year, so hopefully he can turn that around. He's a guy who I figured would just kind of hit. His hitting range are pretty decent, so hopefully he can start to turn that around a bit. That would be pretty good. McCutcheon has been kind of fine. His ratings have declined, mainly kind of his defensive ratings, though. His hitting ratings have declined a bit, but his defensive ratings have declined a pretty good bit. He's a guy who pretty much should be a DH. But with those ratings, you can put him in left, which is pretty much what we do. He plays in left against left-handed pitchers. And Brian Reynolds has actually been pretty good for us. He's off to the best start he's pretty much ever had. And of course, in the last few seasons, he's struggled a good bit. Last year, he turned things around a decent chunk at the end, and ended up having kind of an okay offensive season. But this year, he's been good. He's been hitting above league average pretty much the entire year. He's been our best hitter on the team besides Ko, probably. So, he's been off to a pretty good start this year. Travis Swaggerty, he's played a bit, not many starts, but has been a frequent pinch hitter off the bench against us for right-handed pitching. 255, 345, and 314. He's been fine in 50 ABs. Again, it's kind of hard to judge a player from that. He's performed well. AAA performed well in AAA last year. So he's there, of course. You probably noticed that the player that we picked in the Rule 5 draft, Kendall, I can't remember his first name, we picked him to play center field. He just was playing awful. Not even worth mentioning. I think about 2 weeks ago, probably, I ended up releasing him. He was hitting 100, absolutely no power, wasn't really doing anything of note. So I went ahead and released him back to his former team. So he's done this organization. We sent him back. And then in his place, we didn't call up. We picked up Carlos Tocci on waivers. He had been pretty good this season with the Nationals in a very limited time. They put him on waivers. I decided to pick him up mainly because I liked his center field defensive ratings. Of course, center field has been a pretty big black hole for us, so decided, at least he can play good center field. He's a contact-ish bat. His contact and avoid K ratings are meh, but I mean he has been performing well, so I guess I decided to give him a shot, and he's hit in the 64 Bs that he's had with us. Actually, we've been a bit above league average, so we're just going to keep playing him there until he isn't worth playing there anymore probably this season. Jake Bowers just gotten off to kind of a rough start. Usually he gets off to a pretty quick start for us and is a pretty good player in the past 2 years, but this year not so much. 248, 284, 393. Not the greatest start. Hopefully he can turn it around. His ratings again aren't the most fantastic, but he's a pretty decent first base corner outfield guy option for us, and we have him under team control for a bit, so hopefully he can continue to be a decent player for us as he has been in the past few years. So that's pretty much it for hitting wise. Other than that, getting into pitching now. And looking at it again, pitching has been a stronger suit for us than hitting this year. There's one player that I want to mention who is not currently on the roster, and that's Adbert Alzolay, a guy who we had picked up last year in a trade, I believe. At least I'm pretty sure it was a trade, not on waivers. Can go ahead and see that really quick to see. We got him in exchange for Chad Kuhl, who looks like hasn't had much success actually. Actually this year he's doing well in the bullpen with the Giants, but hasn't had much success then. But he was a guy who we traded for, a guy who I thought could be a decent starting prospect, and who had been fine with the Cubs. And pretty much ever since we've gotten him, he's been pretty bad. He was actually pretty okay in 2021, I guess. His numbers weren't too bad, but this year, he's just been absolutely terrible. ERA of almost 8. That was last year. He wasn't terrible in the first season. Last year he was very terrible for us, and this year he's been even worse. I thought that maybe that was just a starting role, because he really doesn't have that great control. Usually 50 rating is pretty much the threshold for being an effective starter, a good starter. Sometimes you can get away with low control and good stuff. So we're working him out of the bullpen this year, and he just was not good at all. He wasn't striking out anyone anymore. He still is having the same walk problems. He allows a ton of home runs. So it was just time to waive him. Those ratings are promising, and I, prefer to keep him in the organization. But if someone claims him, So we'll just kind of see what happens with that. Kind of disappointing that he hasn't panned out. So in that time, we called up Blake Cederland, who of course is pretty highly rated. Hasn't pitched much yet, so we can't really say anything about him, but he has not been awesome in that time. Richard Rodriguez is also a guy who's been pretty poor for us. Again, hasn't pitched very much, but he's so low rated that the computer probably doesn't want to pitch him a lot, even though he has been an effective reliever for us in the past few years. So his time might also be up. We have some pretty good pitching depth with a lot of guys who are rated around 50. In AAA, AA, so he might be a guy who we just have to outright release, because he has the ability to refuse a demotion. And of course, in real life, Richard Rodriguez is a pretty good reliever, but in this, he's declined rather quickly. He did get injured as soon as we pretty much started the series. Nick Nelson, who was good last year for us, is off to kind of a rough start. For round 5, walking a lot of guys, walking a lot more than he did last year. He's almost got his walk total up to what it was last year, so hopefully he can kind of curve that issue. JT Brew Baker, another guy who wasn't awesome last year, got hurt last year, has come back, and he's just kind of a middling pitcher. I've talked about this. I don't think too highly of his ratings, but at this point, the cost of keeping around is better than the kind of cost that it would be to upgrade, and of course, we're not really trying to compete too hard right now, so he's just fine for now. But again, this season, the time for Priester and Rocker to come up is getting closer, so he might see a demotion to the bullpen if we do make that call sooner rather than later. Victor Gonzalez. This is kind of where we get into the next echelon of guys. Pretty much all of these guys have not been very good, but pretty much everyone else who we've had has been pretty good for us. Victor Gonzalez, kind of a hybrid starter reliever. Not the best stamina, but he's been pretty decent. FIP of 3.7. Doesn't strike out a ton guys, but also doesn't really walk guys. Really doesn't allow any home runs, at least this season. So he's been pretty good, although he might be privy to a little bit of BABIP luck. 260 wasn't too crazy, but yeah, he's been pretty decent for us this year. Scott Alexander, of course, we picked him in the Rule 5 draft, although he's more of an established veteran. He's kind of had a whack-ish year. He has a pretty decent FIP. His ERA is kind of high. He hasn't pitched many innings. Not a good walk to strikeout ratio, but kind of continue to monitor his season how it goes. Zach Eflin, he's more of a kind of a control pitcher. He's had an extremely good season ERA-wise, about 2. We already know his performance is more towards like a 3.65 FIP, but don't get me wrong, he's been pretty good this season. I'm sure a good defense probably has something to do with that, as he is more of a ground ball pitcher. So it's good to see that, and he's been having a pretty good season. R.G. Bradley has also been having a okay season, basically the same season as last year. I mean, he's not too fantastic this game. This is last year, and we definitely won't be bringing him back, at least for the $3 million tag. Yeah, he's just an okay mediocre reliever. He struck out a lot of guys, but he has just been basically okay-ish for us. I mean, a 3.6 FIP is like pretty good. Of course, he strikes out a lot of guys, so his FIP is a lot better than ERA. So I mean, he's performed better than his ERA. He's a fine reliever, but maybe not worth it. $3 million for a small market team. Mitch Keller, he's been pretty good. He's been our best pitcher, and he's been our best pitcher pretty much ever since we started the series. 2.65 ERA. He'll probably be competing for another All-Star appearance this year to be the Pirates representative, and he honestly might get up the way he's been pitching so far this year. Javi Guerra, he's been pretty good for us. He's been pretty good for us throughout the series. This might be his best year yet. Very good ERA, a little higher FIP that more accurately shows how he's been. But he's been good. Tristan Mckenzie, of course, we acquired him in a trade last year. We let him be a starter last year, and he was not very effective in that role. This year, we have let him work as a reliever, which is probably better for him because of his fragile injury proneness. But he is a dynamite reliever. He's got 3+ pitches in the changeup. That's not too bad either. And he's just fantastic out of the bullpen for us. I mean, 2.68 FIP. That is pretty good, and I'm confident that he'll probably be a stud reliever for us for quite a while. So that should be good for us. Jeff Hartley is also a guy who has performed pretty good for us in the past few years, and he is right on that again. ERA not as good, but of course he is a decent strikeout guy, about 10 per 9, and his FIP is 2.59, so he's been pretty good. And then Mitch White, he got hurt for a while, so he just didn't pitch in the major leagues for us, and he's only played 4 innings. He probably won't pitch much longer for us. He's had options, so I figured, if he got hurt, why not call him up, see just what he can do. Although, I mean, it's been 4 innings. He's done pretty well. I wouldn't expect that to hold up, but we'll see. Again, Priester and Rocker are on their way. Both have reached about 50 rating, and if Rocker was pitching better, I probably would have called him up already, but he is not. Priester's been okay. I'd probably call him up sooner, but we'll see. No reason to rush in the major leagues. Rocker is 23, kind of getting to be 24, and Priester is also 22, kind of about to be 23. So they'll get the call this season. I'm pretty confident with that, but the question is when. Just haven't had a chance to make a move. If a starter gets hurt, we'd probably go with one or both of them, but I'm in no rush. At the All-Star break, though, they probably should both be on the roster. And with that said, I think I'm going to go ahead and end this episode. Pretty much kind of how I always have been doing it, just kind of recapping the first part of the season. If you think that I should follow the team kind of week by week and kind of go as a progression throughout the season while I'm simming, let me know. This is just the best way I think to do it. I also wouldn't be opposed to do it, but I also kind of think it might be a bit boring to do that, as like we're not that good of a team. I think it could be interesting to do if we were, a good team that was contending or trying to make the playoffs. That'd be interesting, but I just don't know, of course, if anyone would want to see that while we aren't necessarily the best team. But again, just let me know in the comments. Like the video, if you liked it, just tell me pretty much your overall thoughts on the series. If you're enjoying it, that would be appreciated. But again, so I think we'll go ahead and end the video there. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next episode.